Darius Kane checked his weapons one last time before leaving his ship. His gun sat heavy in its holster. The small device in his pocket could drop an alien twice his size. Kane was ready for the hunt. People feared Kane across 3 star systems. He used to be a soldier for the Federation, but now he worked alone. He caught people, or aliens, and delivered them to whoever paid the most. No questions asked. "Computer, show me the targets again," Kane said, his voice rough from lack of use. A blue light filled the small cabin of his ship, the *redemption*. 2 faces appeared. The first was a female Nixian. Her skin had a soft glow, and her eyes were large and bright purple. Nixians were rare aliens who could read minds. The second face was a small child, clearly her daughter. The child had the same glowing skin and purple eyes. Kane stared at their faces. Location confirmed. Targets located in lower levels of Artemis Station. Working maintenance jobs, the computer replied. Payment amount: 50,000 credits upon delivery, half paid in advance. Kane nodded. That money would keep the debt collectors away. Last month, he had lost big at the gambling tables on Titan. If he didn't pay soon, they would take his ship. Without his ship, he was nothing. He didn't know why someone wanted a Nixian woman and her child. Maybe for their telepathic abilities. Maybe for research. Maybe for the exotic pet trade. Kane told himself he didn't care. The ship docked with a loud clang at Artemis Station. The station was huge, a small city floating in space. The rich lived in the upper levels with clean air and real food. The poor lived below, breathing recycled air and eating food made in labs. Kane stepped out of his ship. He wore plain clothes to blend in. Only the small Federation pin on his collar showed his past. It still opened doors and scared people who knew what it meant. He moved through the crowds toward the lower levels. The air grew thicker and dirtier as he descended. Lights flickered, and the walls showed patches of rust. This was where people came to disappear. This was where his targets were hiding. At a security checkpoint, a guard stopped him. "ID in purpose," the guard said without looking up. Kane slid a credit chip across the desk instead, looking for maintenance level. The guard pocketed the chip. "Take elevator B. Don't cause trouble down there." In the elevator, Kane checked the small device in his pocket again. It would block the Nixian woman's telepathic powers. Without that, she could read his mind and know his plans. She could plant thoughts in his head or make him see things that weren't there. Nixians were dangerous if you weren't prepared. The elevator doors opened to a dim hallway that smelled of oil and sweat. Kane stepped out and activated his tracker. A small dot began blinking on the screen, showing him the way. "Found you," he whispered, moving silently through the shadows of Artemis Station's forgotten levels, hunting his prey who had no idea what was coming. Red emergency lights flashed as Kane ran through the hallways. Warning sounds blared from speakers. The station shook as the first explosions began. "All personnel evacuate immediately," a calm computer voice announced. This is not a drill. People ran in panic, pushing past Kane. No one stopped him or asked questions. Everyone was trying to save themselves. Kane reached level 6 and found the containment area. Most of the guards had fled. Only one remained, trying to lock the alien prisoners in their cells. Kane didn't hesitate. He hit the guard from behind, knocking him out. Using the guard's keycard, he opened the cells containing Lyra and Sarah. "Kane." Lyra cried, dropping her act of being unconscious. "What's happening?" "The station is self-destructing," Kane said, helping Sarah stand. The child looked weak and scared. "We need to reach the communications hub now." They ran through the chaos of the dying station. Twice they had to stop as pieces of ceiling fell. The air was getting thin as life support systems failed. There, Kane pointed to a door marked communications. It was locked, but his implant made quick work of it. Inside, screens and control panels lined the walls. Kane went straight to the main console and plugged in the device with the stolen files. "What are you doing?" Lyra asked, holding Sarah close. "Sending everything to the Federation Council and every news network in the galaxy," Kane said, typing quickly. "The truth about Helix needs to get out, even if we don't make it." The station shook violently. They didn't have much time. "It's sending," Kane said. "Now we need to." The door burst open. Dr. Vaughn stood there, a gun in his hand. His perfect white coat was torn and dirty. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead. "You've ruined everything," he said, pointing the gun at them. Kane stepped in front of Lyra and Sarah. "It's over, Vaughn. Everyone will know what Helix has been doing." "Then I'll make sure you don't live to see it," Dr. Vaughn snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger. Suddenly, Sarah stepped forward, her small hand reaching out toward Dr. Vaughn. The scientist froze, his eyes going wide. "What are you doing to me?" he gasped. "Sarah is showing you the truth," Lyra said softly. "All the pain you caused, all the lives you destroyed." Dr. Vaughn dropped his gun, clutching his head. "Make it stop," he cried, falling to his knees. Kane grabbed Lyra and Sarah. "We need to go. Now." They ran past Dr. Vaughn, heading for the escape pods. The station was falling apart around them. They'd reached the last pod just as a massive explosion rocked the station. "Get in," Kane said, pushing them toward the pod. Lyra looked at him. "You're coming too." Kane shook his head. "There's only enough oxygen for two, and I need to make sure that transmission completes." "No." Lyra grabbed his arm. "There must be another way." Another explosion, closer this time. They had seconds, not minutes. "Take care of her," Kane said, looking at Sarah. "She's going to save a lot of lives someday." He pushed them into the pod and closed the door. As the pod launched, Kane turned back toward the communications room. He had one last thing to do. 3 days later, Federation ships found a small escape pod floating in space. Inside were Lyra and Sarah, weak but alive. And to everyone's surprise, they found something else. A survival capsule ejected from the station's emergency systems. Inside was Kane, badly injured but breathing. As the medics worked on him, Lyra took his hand. "You came back from the dead," she said. Kane smiled weakly. "I guess the *redemption* really did live up to its name." 6 months later, in a small house on a peaceful Federation colony, Lyra watched as Sarah played in a garden. The girl's health had improved, and she laughed as she ran through the grass. A shuttle landed nearby. Kane stepped out, looking healthier than when she'd last seen him. The Federation insignia was back on his collar. "What will you do now?" Lyra asked as he walked up. Kane looked at his ship, the *redemption*, gleaming in the sunlight. "Help find the others," he said. "There are more people like you out there, running from the wrong people." "For what purpose?" Lyra asked. Kane smiled, watching Sarah play. "To bring them home." The *redemption* docked at Helix's space station right on time. Kane stood tall and confident, his face showing nothing. Beside him, Lyra and Sarah lay on a floating stretcher, appearing unconscious. The special patches Kane had given them were working perfectly. "Darius Kane, bounty hunter," he said to the guards at the entrance. "I have a delivery for Dr. Vaughn." The guards checked his ID and scanned him for weapons. Kane had his gun in plain sight. Bounty hunters were allowed to be armed. What the scanner didn't detect was the special Federation implant now hidden inside his body. "Wait here," one guard said. "Someone will come for you." Kane stood patiently, his eyes scanning the station, cameras in every corner, guards at each doorway. This would not be easy. After a few minutes, a man in a white coat approached. He was tall and thin with cold gray eyes. "Mr. Kane," he said, "I'm Dr. Elias Vaughn. I see you've been successful." Kane nodded. "2 Nixians, as ordered. The woman and her child." Dr. Vaughn leaned over the stretcher, examining Lyra and Sarah like they were objects, not people. "Excellent specimens," he said. "The child appears to have some kind of fever. Reaction to the sedatives." Kane lied smoothly. "Nothing serious." "Very well. Your payment will be sent when we confirm their condition in the lab." Dr. Vaughn turned to the guards. "Take them to level 6, special containment area." Kane followed as they moved through the station. He carefully noted every turn, every security checkpoint. The implant in his body was mapping everything, sending the information back to his ship. The elevator needed a special keycard. Dr. Vaughn swiped his, and they began to move downward. Level 6 was deep in the station. As they walked along a white hallway, Sarah suddenly moved. It was a small twitch, but Dr. Vaughn noticed. "The sedation is wearing off," he said sharply. "Guard, adjust the dosage." A guard moved towards Sarah, reaching roughly for the patch on her neck. Without thinking, Kane grabbed the guard's arm and twisted it hard. There was a snapping sound, and the guard cried out in pain. Everyone froze. Kane quickly let go. "Careful with the merchandise," he said, keeping his voice calm despite his racing heart. "You damaged them. You decreased their value." Dr. Vaughn raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The injured guard was taken away, and another took his place. They continued to a large room with glass cells along the walls. Other aliens were in some of the cells, sleeping or sitting still, their eyes empty. "Put them in cells 12 and 13, Dr. Vaughn ordered. "Separate the child from the mother." Kane watched as Lyra and Sarah were carried to different cells. He saw Lyra's fingers twitch slightly. She was awake and aware, just as planned. "Your services are no longer required, Mr. Kane," Dr. Vaughn said. "Security will escort you back to your ship." Kane nodded and turned to leave, but instead of going to his ship, he had other plans. As soon as he was out of sight of the main lab, he touched his wrist, activating the implant. "Computer," he whispered to his ship's AI through the implant. "Begin Phase 1. All across the station, small problems began happening. A light flickered here, a door jammed there. Nothing major, just enough to keep security busy, while Kane made his way back toward level 6. The real mission was just beginning. Kane followed the blinking dot on his tracker through the dim halls of the station's lower levels. The air smelled of rust and old cooking. Pipes leaked overhead, making small puddles on the metal floor. He passed people who kept their eyes down. No one asked questions here. No one wanted to know your business. Kane liked it that way. The tracker led him to a narrow hallway with doors on both sides. Small rooms where station workers lived. The dot stopped blinking at the door marked E42. Kane put his hand on his gun and listened. He heard soft voices inside. Taking a deep breath, he pressed the small button on his wrist. A green light glowed under his skin. Now the Nixian couldn't read his thoughts. He knocked on the door. "Maintenance," he said, making his voice sound bored. "Checking air filters." Silence. Then soft footsteps. The door opened just a crack. A woman's eye appeared, large, purple, and full of fear. "We don't need maintenance," she said softly. Her voice had a strange musical quality, like all Nixians. Kane pushed the door hard. It flew open, sending the woman stumbling back into the small room. It was barely bigger than Kane's ship cabin. A bed, a small table, a cooking unit, and in the corner, a child hiding behind a blanket. The woman stood straight, putting herself between Kane and the child. She wasn't what Kane expected. In the pictures, Nixians always looked perfect, tall and elegant with glowing skin. This woman was thin, too thin. Her skin had lost much of its glow. Her clothes were old and patched, but her eyes still burned bright with intelligence and fear. "Please," she said in perfect human standard. "Whatever they're paying you, I can." Kane didn't let her finish. He pulled out the small device from his pocket and pressed the button. A high sound filled the room, too high for human ears, but the Nixians heard it. Both the woman and child put their hands to their ears. "Mom." The child cried out before she collapsed to the floor. The woman fought it longer, her eyes locked on Kane's. "You don't understand what you're doing," she whispered before she too fell. Kane noticed something strange. As the woman fell, she turned her body to land near her daughter. Even unconscious, she reached out to protect the child. He stood over them, frowning. The job was done. Easy money. So why did he feel uneasy? He knelt down to check them. The woman's sleeve pulled up, showing marks on her arm. Not random cuts or bruises, but careful, precise marks, like someone had been testing something on her skin. The child had similar marks on her neck. Kane had seen marks like these before. Back when he served in the Federation, he'd helped raid an illegal research lab. The test subjects had marks just like these. He shook his head. Not his business. The client paid for delivery, not questions. Kane carefully picked up the child first, then came back for the woman. As he carried them to his ship, he couldn't help noticing how light they were, like they hadn't eaten well in months. Back on the Redemption *, Kane placed them in the secure hold. He gave them both a sedative to keep them asleep for the journey. Computer, set course for the delivery point. He ordered as he strapped himself into the pilot's seat. Course set. Estimated arrival. 72 hours. The ship lifted smoothly from the dock. As Artemis Station disappeared behind them, Kane found himself wondering about the marks on the Nixian's skin and why a mother and child were running. Not his business, he reminded himself. Not his business at all. "Tell me about their security," Kane said. He and Lyra sat at the small table in the ship's kitchen area. Sarah was sleeping nearby, her fever finally down. Lyra closed her eyes, remembering. There are guards at every door. They wear black uniforms with the helix symbol, a blue spiral. They carry stun guns and sleep gas. "What about the lab where they kept you?" "Level 6. You need a special card to use the elevator. The scientists wear white coats with ID cards. Dr. Vaughn is the head scientist. Lyra's voice broke. He did most of the tests on Sarah." Kane's face hardened. "How did you escape?" "One of the cleaning staff helped us. She gave us her ID card and told us which supply ship to hide on. I don't know what happened to her after." Lyra looked down at her hands. "Many humans have been kind to us. That's why I kept hoping." Kane nodded. Hope was a dangerous thing in his line of work. But sometimes it was all you had. His computer beeped. A message from his Federation contact had arrived. "Good news," Kane said after reading it. "My friend got us security codes for Helix's main research station. And this." He showed Lyra a picture of a small device. "It's a Federation intelligence implant. It will help us get in and out." "You plan to break into Helix?" Lyra asked, surprised. "No," Kane said with a small smile. "I plan to walk right in the front door. With you and Sarah." Lyra looked confused and afraid. "I'll explain," Kane said. "I'm still going to deliver you to Helix, just like they paid me to do. But before that, we're going to prepare a surprise for them." Kane pulled up a map of Helix's research station on his computer. "My contact says the station has a main communications room here." He pointed to a spot on the map. "If we can get to it, we can send everything we know about Helix's illegal research to the Federation Council and the news networks across the galaxy." "But how will we get there?" "They'll put us in cells as soon as we arrive," Lyra said. Kane pulled out 3 small patches from his medical kit. "These look like standard medical patches, but they're not. They're modified neural suppressors. They'll make it look like you and Sarah are sedated, but you'll actually be awake. You just have to act unconscious until the right moment." Lyra touched one of the patches carefully. "And you? What will you do?" "I'll be the bounty hunter delivering his catch," Kane said. "Just doing my job. Until I'm not." He pulled out a small metal object from his pocket. It was shaped like a pen. This is the Federation implant. Once it's in place, it will connect with my ship's systems. We can cause distractions, open doors, and more. Lyra looked at Kane, her purple eyes searching his face. Why are you doing this? You could just take the money and walk away. Kane was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because I couldn't save my sister, but I can try to save your daughter. He stood up and went to the pilot's seat. Get some rest. We reach Helix Station in 8 hours. And then, the real work begins. Lyra watched him go, hope growing stronger inside her. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe they might have a future after all. Kane moved through the hallways of Helix Station, following the map in his mind. The security guard walked ahead of him, leading him back to the docking area. Neither of them spoke. Suddenly, alarms began to ring in another part of the station. The guard's radio crackled. Security alert in Section 4. All available personnel report. The guard looked at Kane. Wait here, he said, then ran toward the trouble. Kane smiled. His ship's computer was causing problems all over the station, just as planned. Now he was alone and free to move. He turned and walked quickly back toward Level 6. He needed to find the main research lab before freeing Lyra and Sarah. The evidence they needed would be there. Using his implant, Kane unlocked a service door and slipped into a narrow maintenance passage. This would let him move without being seen by cameras. In minutes, he reached a door marked Research Lab A, authorized personnel only. He pressed his ear against it. No sounds from inside. He used the security code his Federation contact had given him, and the door slid open. The lab was large and white. Strange machines lined the walls. In the center was a table with straps to hold someone down. Kane felt sick looking at it, imagining Sarah strapped there. He went to the main computer and plugged in a small device from his pocket. It began copying all the research files. What he found shocked even him, and he had seen many terrible things in his life. Helix wasn't just studying the healing properties in Nixian blood. They were using it to create a weapon, a disease that could target specific types of people based on their DNA. It could kill millions while leaving others completely healthy. And the primary targets matched the DNA of people living in the outer colony planets, the same people who had been protesting against the big corporations like Helix. The computer beeped. All files copied. Kane had the evidence now. But as he turned to leave, the door opened. Dr. Vaughn stood there, his cold eyes narrowed. I thought there was something off about you, Kane, he said. No ordinary bounty hunter asks so many questions or shows concern for his cargo. 2 guards appeared behind him, guns raised. I'd kill you right now, Dr. Vaughn continued. But I'm curious. Who are you working for? The Federation. The Resistance. Kane said nothing. His mind raced, looking for a way out. Dr. Vaughn smiled, a cold, empty smile. No matter. You'll tell us eventually. Everyone does. Just then, Kane's implant vibrated. A message from his ship. Warning. Station security has activated Cerberus protocol. Kane knew what that meant. Cerberus was the ultimate security measure. Destroy everything to hide the evidence, including the station and everyone on it. You're going to kill everyone here, Kane said, his voice steady despite his fear. Including yourselves. Dr. Vaughn's smile disappeared. What are you talking about? Cerberus protocol. Self-destruct sequence. Your bosses would rather destroy this station than let their secrets get out. For the first time, fear showed in Dr. Vaughn's eyes. He turned to one of the guards. Check the main security system. As they were distracted, Kane made his move. He threw the small device in his hand, a flash grenade, and dove for cover. The room exploded with blinding light. Kane heard shouts and confusion as he ran past the stunned men and out the door. He had to get to Lyra and Sarah quickly. The station would start falling apart soon, and they needed to reach the communication hub before it was too late. Time was running out. 2 days passed as the *Redemption* flew through space. Kane checked on his prisoners twice a day. They remained asleep, thanks to the sedatives he gave them. The journey was peaceful and quiet, until the crying started. Kane was checking the ship's systems when he heard it, a soft, frightened sob coming from the secure hold. He frowned. The Nixians should still be asleep. He grabbed his gun and walked to the hold. When the door slid open, he saw the child, Sarah, according to the file, sitting up and crying. Her mother still lay unconscious beside her. "Mom, wake up," the child said, shaking her mother. "Please wake up." When she saw Kane, she pressed herself against the wall, eyes wide with fear. Her skin had a strange glow to it, brighter than before, but not in a healthy way. It reminded Kane of fever. He put his gun away slowly. "Don't be afraid," he said, though his voice was still rough. "I'm not going to hurt you." The child didn't answer. She just stared at him with those large purple eyes. Kane remembered something about Nixians. The young ones couldn't speak human standard well. They used telepathy to talk with their parents until they learned proper speech. He sighed and touched the button on his wrist. The green light faded as he lowered his mental shields, just a little. Immediately, images flooded his mind. A bright white room, people in masks, pain, running through dark streets, hiding in cargo holds of ships, always running, always hiding. Fear, so much fear, and something else, a reason. Why these two were so important, why the child was special. Her blood contained something unique, something that could heal a terrible human disease that had killed millions on the outer colonies. Kane raised his shields again quickly. He felt dizzy from the rush of images. The child watched him, still afraid but curious now. He pulled out his medical scanner and pointed it at the child. The reading made him frown. Her body temperature was too high, and her heart beat too fast. "You're sick," he said, "but not from my medicine. Something else." Kane went to his medical cabinet and came back with a small patch. "This will help with the fever," he said, showing it to her before slowly putting it on her arm. The child flinched but didn't pull away. "Your mom will wake up soon," he told her. "The medicine affects adults longer." He went to leave, then stopped. "Are you hungry?" The child nodded after a moment of hesitation. Kane brought back a nutrition bar and some water. The way she ate, fast and desperate, told him they hadn't had regular meals for a long time. Back in his pilot's seat, Kane couldn't stop thinking about the images from the child's mind. He pulled up information about his client on the ship's computer. Helix Pharmaceuticals, a big company that made medicine. They had a clean record, at least on the surface. But Kane had been around long enough to know that clean records could hide dirty secrets. He sent a message to an old friend who worked in Federation intelligence. "Need information on Helix Pharmaceuticals. Urgent." As stars streaked past his ship window, Kane wondered what he had gotten himself into. And for the first time in years, he wondered if the money was worth it. Kane sat at his computer, reading the information his old friend had sent. What he learned about Helix Pharmaceuticals made his stomach turn. On the surface, Helix made medicine that helped people. But deep inside the company, they did terrible things. They had secret labs where they tested dangerous drugs on people without permission. Some test subjects died. Others disappeared. Kane looked at the money in his account. Half the payment was already there. Enough to pay his gambling debts. The rest would come when he delivered the Nixians. A soft sound made him turn. The Nixian woman stood in the doorway of the bridge. Her eyes were clear now. The sedative had worn off. Kane reached for his gun, but stopped. She wasn't attacking. She just stood there, watching him. "Your daughter has a fever," Kane said. "I gave her medicine to help." "Thank you," the woman, Lyra, said. Her voice was soft but strong. "She has been sick on and off since we escaped." "Escaped from where?" Kane asked, though he already guessed the answer. "From Helix, from their labs. Lyra moved closer, her purple eyes fixed on his. Have you ever watched someone you love be treated as a thing, not a person? The question hit Kane hard. Images of his sister flashed in his mind. Taken by raiders when they were teenagers. Sold to a pleasure house near Jupiter. Kane had spent years searching for her, only to find her broken and lost, her mind gone from the drugs they gave her. Everything he had done since then, joining the Federation, then leaving to become a bounty hunter, all started with that failure to protect his sister. They will separate us, Lyra continued. They will use Sarah for experiments until there is nothing left of her. She is special, even among our kind. What makes her so special? Kane asked. Her blood can cure the colony plague, Lyra said. The disease that has killed millions of humans on the outer planets. Kane nodded. The colony plague had taken half the population on some planets. A cure would be worth billions. But Helix doesn't want to cure people, Lyra said. They want to control who gets cured and who doesn't. They want to use my daughter's blood to make weapons. Kane turned back to his computer. The information his friend sent showed that Lyra was telling the truth. Helix had a secret weapons program that used alien biology to target specific groups of people. I can't just let you go, Kane said finally. They'll send someone else after you. Someone worse than me. Then what will you do with us, bounty hunter? Lyra asked. Kane looked at the navigation screen. They were 12 hours from the meeting point where he was supposed to hand over Lyra and Sarah. He made his decision. I'm going to deliver you exactly as promised, he said. Lyra's face fell in despair, but Kane continued. But first, we're going to change the rules of this game. He turned to his communication system and sent a message to his Federation contact. Need a favor, Vig-1. Will owe you. Kane looked at Lyra. I need to know everything about Helix's research facility, every detail you can remember. For the first time since he captured her, Lyra smiled. It changed her whole face, making her look younger and hopeful. I remember everything, she said. I was waiting for someone who would listen.